Human beings made these cave paintings as much as 30,000 years ago. Biologically, their brains were exactly the same as ours today. For example, their brains and ours both recognize that the rhino's repeated horns represent motion, and we both are emotionally affected by music played in the cave chambers. In some caves, adjacent paintings were made 5,000 years apart by people whose ways of life had changed very little throughout that span of time. These ancestors were not simple people. Daily life consisted of thousands of cultural details, telling, for example, how to greet others, how to harvest animals from the region, celebrate births and marriages, and mourn deaths. If a newborn infant were somehow transported from that time to today, he or she would learn today's way of life and is likely and capable as today's children to become an artist, engineer, or doctor. Some 10,000 years ago, a changing climate forced some of us human beings in certain locations, such as in Mesopotamia in ancient Iraq, to become full-time farmers. By chance, irrigation was the key to the abundance that enabled and required us to form cities and pull efforts to build civilization. The same human being now makes spaceships, using nothing but our animal minds.
5. All 3 engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the space shuttle.
The motions of the spaceship and astronaut are predicted with Newton's equation, which he figured out some 350 years ago. Your everyday life is filled with things you have inherited from the many peoples of the earth, as explained in Ralph Letton's essay about the diffusion of inventions that I will now recite. He describes the origins of many elements of daily life for a man who lives in the United States. Our solid American citizen awakens in a bed built on a pattern that originated in the Near East but was modified in Northern Europe before it was transmitted to America. He throws back covers made from cotton, domesticated in India, or linen, domesticated in the Near East, or wool from sheep, also domesticated in the Near East, or silk, the use of which was discovered in China. All of these materials have been spun and woven by a process invented in the Near East. He slips into his moccasins, invented by the Indians of the eastern woodlands, and goes into the bathroom, whose fixtures are a mixture of European and American Indian inventions, both of recent date. He takes off his pajamas, a garment invented in India, and washes with soap invented by the ancient Gauls. He then shaves, a masochistic rite that seems to have been derived from either Sumer or ancient Egypt. Returning to the bedroom, he removes his clothes from a chair of Southern European type and proceeds to dress. He puts on garments whose form originally derived from the skin clothing of the nomads of the Asiatic steppes, puts on shoes from skins tanned by a process invented in ancient Egypt and cut to a pattern derived from the classical civilizations of the Mediterranean, and ties around his neck a strip of brightly colored cloth that is a vestigial survival of the shoulder shawls worn by 17th century Croatians. Before going out for breakfast, he glances through the window, made of glass invented in Egypt, and if it is raining, puts on overshoes made of rubber discovered by the Central American Indians, and takes an umbrella invented in southeastern Asia. Upon his head he puts a hat made of felt, a material invented in the Asiatic steppes. On his way to breakfast he stops to buy a paper, paying for it with coins, an ancient Lydian invention. At the restaurant, a whole new series of borrowed elements confronts him. His plate is made of a form of pottery invented in China. His knife is of steel, an alloy first made in southern India. His fork, a medieval Italian invention, and his spoon, a derivative of a Roman original. He begins breakfast with an orange from the Mediterranean, a cantaloupe from Persia, or perhaps a piece of African watermelon. With this he has coffee, an Abyssinian plant with cream and sugar. Both the domestication of cows and the idea of milking them originated in the Near East, while sugar was first made in India. After his fruit and coffee, he goes on to waffles, which are cakes made by a Scandinavian technique from wheat domesticated in Asia Minor. Over these he pours maple syrup, invented by the Indians of the eastern woodlands. As a side dish, he may have the egg of a species of bird domesticated in Indochina, or thin strips of the flesh of an animal domesticated in eastern Asia that had been salted and smoked by a process developed in northern Europe. When our friend has finished eating, he settles back to smoke, an American Indian habit, consuming a plant domesticated in Brazil in either a pipe, derived from the Indians of Virginia, or a cigarette, derived from Mexico. If he is hardy enough, he may even attempt a cigar, transmitted to us from the Antilles by way of Spain. While smoking, he reads the news of the day, imprinted in characters invented by the ancient Semites upon a material invented in China by a process invented in Germany. As he absorbs the accounts of foreign troubles, he will, if he is a good conservative citizen, thank a Hebrew deity in an Indo-European language that he is 100% American. We are all in this together. We all contribute to the progress of our civilization. Individuals vary in height and resistance to specific diseases and such. Variations in the traits or genetic makeup of the individuals of the species occur and are tested for usefulness by the environment of climate, predators, and prey. The environment does not produce genetic changes. It only tests the usefulness of the existing variations in the individuals of the species. So this is said to be evolution by natural selection. The useful traits continue to get passed on to future generations simply because future generations are then more likely to occur. As the environment and hence the requirements of the best match slowly change through many generations, there will be a shift in the average characteristics of that species. After several such shifts, the species will have changed significantly. It will have evolved. A species typically lasts 1 million years, but some change in 1/10 that time or last 10 times longer. In the 750 million years since multicellular life existed on the Earth, some animals have gone through 1,000 species-size shifts. Are we model number 1,000 in the evolution of multicellular creatures into people? Whenever you hear the word evolution, you should think of changes in the most appropriate traits due to changes in the environment of climate, predators, and food. Evolution is about becoming better matched to the environment, and it is not about becoming stronger or more complicated. It is not about the survival of the strongest. Scientists have millions of examples of evolution at work. Behavioral and emotional traits are also passed on to successive generations and are subject to the same rules of evolution by natural selection. We are born with a small set of emotions that are innate reactions to those circumstances that repeatedly occurred through thousands of generations. What is meant by innate behavior? They are in our genes. They are automatic, and they do not have to be learned. Some simple examples of innate things include breathing, sneezing, coughing, and yawning. When we are surprised, then our jaw drops. This reaction is innate, not learned. The people of every culture around the world do this. When chimpanzees are surprised, their jaw drops too, and this indicates that the reaction began before our evolutionary lines diverged some 6 million years ago. A newborn innately nurses. A toddler innately follows mom around, holding onto her leg, and mimics everything that others do. The toddler does not have to be taught to do this. It automatically happens. Parents innately care for their newborn child. There are 6,000 species of mammals. Every furry creature is a mammal. General mammalian behaviors include feeding, play, communication, relations with others of the same group and with other groups of the same species, defense against predators, dealing with the climate, reproduction, and child rearing and training. For the last 200 million years, these have been the daily activities of our direct mammalian ancestors, as they are for us human beings still today. You've seen each of these behaviors in cats and dogs. Mammals are parenting creatures who protect, teach, and rear their offspring through infancy until they in turn become old enough to have their own children. All mammals are parents, but it is the case that only about 5% of mammalian species form monogamous parenting relationships. Mammalian parenthood is a large part of the human animal. We live for our children. We will do anything just to see them smile. Millions of years ago, parenting behavior and parenting love developed simultaneously. Neither occurred without the other. It was not the case that the first parenting mammals acted as parents for hundreds of generations, and then the emotion of parental love was later added. At the moment of childbirth, a few micrograms of the chemical oxytocin is produced in our brains, bonding parents and children for life. What is the meaning of life? Parents easily answer, my children. Children are our greatest joy. Parenting love is millions of years old and is not unique to human beings. If you ask 10,000 persons from 10,000 different cultures around the world, they will all tell you that we live for our children. Throughout the 200,000 years of our species, parents have been bouncing children on their knees, encouraging toddlers to walk and dance, preening their face and hair, hugging them every few minutes, lovingly touching cheek to cheek, adoring them and their light weight while lifting them and carrying them on hips and shoulders, gazing at them with that contented facial expression, and have been ruled by youngsters who look up at them with those big eyes. Every human being on the planet does the same. For millions of years, the priority of every day has been to feed the youngsters. Adults are persistent in getting youngsters to eat. If this were not done, then the species would end in a few days or weeks. So adults have an innate urge to feed the youngsters. When adults see children eating, then those adults feel that all is right in the universe. Mammals are much better at communicating than are reptiles. Mammals make it obvious to each other that they are friendly, are going to attack, or that they are happy, sad, or angry. I can understand the face and posture of a growling dog, but communicate little with insects or reptiles. There are a few hundred species of primates, which are monkeys and apes. The apes include gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, and human beings. One difference between apes and monkeys is that a monkey's arms and legs make only a forward and backwards motion. No sideways movement can be made. Monkeys cannot dangle and swing in tree branches. Instead, they run through the trees more in the manner that a dog runs. Apes differ from monkeys in that they have developed a rotating shoulder that enables them to raise their arms out sideways when grasping a tree branch. You make this motion with your arms as you do jumping jack exercises. A monkey could not. The ape's rotating shoulder was followed by the development of elbows and wrists. You can turn your palm right side up or downward. Your dog cannot do that, neither can a monkey. Monkeys have tails, apes do not. Apes are larger and live longer than monkeys. We primates have been eating eggs for millions of years, making us very sensitive to the sulfurous odor of rotten eggs. Carl Sagan explains that we also share a fear of snakes and a fear of falling from heights, because those are two of a primate's biggest worries. Each species of mammals has a social hierarchy, headed by one individual, for example, the alpha wolf. For us human beings and the other primates, society differs from the other mammals in that the hierarchy is not based on the individual, but on the extended family, which includes cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents and such. A primate group does not have an alpha individual. Instead, one extended family has priority over all other extended families. For millions of years, primates have cooperated as extended families. Other mammals have not. This is why we care first for our extended family members, as does a group of monkeys or apes. Why are we a social species? For the surprisingly simple reason that the food of primates occurs in group-sized bundles, so they search for food as a group and then share it when it is found. The group also watches for predators. This is a mutually beneficial exchange of assistance. Our primate ancestors did this for millions of years. It is in our genes to exchange assistance on any task that is larger than an individual can do alone. We expect our society to be mutually beneficial for everyone and react to anything less as an injustice. This makes us angry. What is the same about every human being? Whenever a person is thinking, doing, or talking, that action involves love and children, spouse, family and friends, or community and justice, and little else. That is all there is to a human being anywhere on the planet and throughout the 200,000 years of our species. We are not the first generation to have these actions. These concerns are innate to our species because we are parenting mammals and social primates. Parenting mammals have existed for 200 million years, and social primates for at least 50 million years. Through thousands of the earliest generations of parenting mammals and social primates, these concerns about family and community resulted in individuals who were more likely to live long enough to have children, and to raise those children until they in turn could have children of their own. That is why these actions became innate. Parenting and social groups originated with the parenting and social emotions that quickly became ingrained. Still today, we are each born with these same emotions and no others. Our emotions are millions of years old, and they are innate, not learned. You do not have to be taught which emotion to feel. Your reaction is innate. Our basic emotions are happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise, anger, sympathy, pride, embarrassment, guilt, and shame. Most of these emotions occur only in social situations. We have names for many emotions that are gradations of these. This small set of emotions developed millions of years ago as they proved to be the best response to situations that continually occurred through thousands of generations. Not only limbs and livers, but emotions and behaviors are also selected by the environment in the process of evolution. For example, sympathy and empathy develop at the same time that a species becomes parenting. We are born with these emotions, and they are evoked by events that still occur in today's society, just as they did long ago. For example, you might feel as if you get angry for thousands of reasons, but you get angry only when you feel that you have been wronged or treated unfairly or unjustly. If you think of the last few times that you were angry, you might remember the specific injustice that caused your anger. We get angry for no other reason. Anger is a social emotion. Notice that happiness comes from other people. Every human being that has ever lived anywhere on the planet shares these feelings and emotions. Others are not toy people, but thinking and feeling human individuals who are just like you and me, in that they share the same desires and concern for love and family, and for community and justice. We have been speaking in a full language for only 70,000 years, but facial expressions are millions of years old and have been used to communicate our emotional state. By this second, Mom and Dad read our emotional state like a book. Before fully spoken language existed, our hominid ancestors could partially communicate using hand gestures. Still today, many of us paint meaning with our hands. For some especially expressive persons, we might say, "If you tie his hands, then he could not speak." Gesturing is so ancient that some still have worldwide meaning. For example, palms up means what or why. Palms down always means no. And hands akimbo on hips means waiting. Such gestures are older than the human dispersal out of Africa. Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam made these same gestures. And what do we human beings use our precious language to most often talk about? Studies find that 2/3 of our conversation is used to talk about each other. We are social creatures. 6-year-olds can speak 2,000 words and understand 20,000 more. All this fits into our brains. Other apes are able to understand language. The bonobo chimpanzee Kanzi learned hundreds of words the same way that human children do, by being surrounded by people since birth and watching and listening to them as they are doing things. Kanzi understands spoken English. For example, in the kitchen, Sue can say, "Kanzi, wash the potatoes and put them in the pan," or "put the green box in the refrigerator," and he will. Kanzi also communicates with a lexigram board that has hundreds of symbols. Kanzi understands more than 1,000 spoken words. Other bonobos, including Panbanisha, acquired language and many other skills, just as Kanzi had done. Kanzi makes stone tools, plays video games, blows out the candles on his birthday cake, writes symbols, expresses anger and sadness, protects others, and does countless amazing things. Kanzi is one of many apes who has been taught to communicate using symbols or sign language. For example, Coco was a gorilla who was taught sign language. When she was first given a radish to eat, she called it cry hurt fruit. Coco was close friends with a kitten whom she named All Ball. When All Ball was killed by a vehicle, Coco expressed her sadness and loudly cried. In the wild, chimpanzee mothers have been seen to carry their deceased infant for days before giving up hope. It is often mentioned that humans and chimpanzees share 98% of their genes. It is also true that humans and mice share 85% of their genes because most of these genes are used to make lungs and livers and arms and legs and such. In the figure we see that 1% of the genes of a mouse occur only in mice. 14% of its genes are in common with other mammals. 6% is shared with other backbone animals. 27% with other multicellular creatures. 29% is shared with the eukaryotes, which are single-celled creatures having a nucleus. And 23% are shared with prokaryotes, whose cells have no nucleus. This means that about half of our genes produce cells, about half produce arms and legs and livers and such, and about 2% makes us human. The DNA of a person has about 20,000 genes, but only 30 genes determine our outer appearance, including the shape of our nose, ears, lips, cheeks, jaw, hair color, and skin tone and such. We human beings are a bunch of genetic clones. Two human beings share 99.9% of their genes and so are only 0.1% genetically different. This is true whether or not those two individuals come from the same hometown or come from opposite sides of the planet, and whether or not they are of the same race. Two siblings differ by half of that 0.1%. This means that a stranger from the other side of the planet is only twice as different from you as is your sibling. Gathering 5 persons from throughout the planet produces little more variety than gathering 5 siblings. For each mammalian species, the social size is determined by the available food packet size. There are 3 general approaches to finding food. First, if the food of a species is found in widely scattered places and occurs in such small quantities that only a single individual can make a meal of it, then that species often consists of lone hunters, such as coyotes or cats. Second, if food sources are widely scattered but occur in group-sized bundles, then the members of that species typically forage as a group and then share the food when it is found. This is the approach typically adopted by us primates. Our ancestors did this for 30 million years. The third case occurs when food is so abundant that it is within each member's constant reach. Food then plays a smaller role in their behavioral interactions, as happens for the grazing mammals, such as gazelles. We human beings innately live in social groups without having to think about it. Still today, we have an innate predisposition to eat together, and eating is much of our social interaction. There are benefits to being a member of a group. These elephants are forming a protective circle around their young. In a group, all members can look for food, watch for predators, and alert the others to their presence. This is a mutually beneficial exchange of assistance. At the same time, group members must compete over any limited resources of food and mates. Most commonly, the members of a species live in social groups where access to food and mates is determined by a dominance hierarchy. The most dominant is the so-called alpha male of the group. Sometimes the alpha is a female. This occurs in lemurs, for example. Fighting is limited by the dominance hierarchy. This means that within the group, each pair of individuals will come to a mutual agreement about who will have priority access to food and potential mates and such. This agreement begins during their adolescent encounters and continues to mature as they mature. From then on, when that pair of individuals approaches an item of mutual interest, the higher-ranking individual takes the item and the other moves on. If each encounter instead resulted in a fight to the death, then pretty soon there would be no members left and the species would disappear from the earth. For example, if a group had 100 members and those paired up one day and fought to the death, then there would be just 50 group members the next day. If those remaining members paired up the next day and fought to the death, then there would be only 25 group members. Through a 1-week period, the sequence of numbers would be 100, 50, 25, 12, 6, 3, 2, and then 1. The group would have eliminated itself in just 1 week. Pairing up in this way would eliminate the 8 billion members of our species in just 33 days, because 2 to the 33rd power is more than 8 billion. The members of a species especially avoid fighting to the death. This is innate behavior, as those members of a species who do not fight to the death are more likely to live long enough to have children. Fist fights among human beings rarely results in death because we have not been biologically equipped to fight to the death. In a group of, say, 100 individuals, we might number those individuals from 1 to 100 according to their position in the hierarchy. This group also consists of several families. The most dominant individual might be a member of family B, while the next 3 most dominant individuals might be members of families C, A, and D. The group members interact as pairs of individuals. Primates differ from the other mammals in that they form more complex social systems that are based on the extended family. Rather than a dominance hierarchy of individuals, primate society consists of a dominance hierarchy of extended families. Within a group of primates, each individual recognizes the other members of its extended family, and the entire extended family cooperates as a unit. Each group member has to recognize the entire extended family of each other group member. In addition, each primate individual knows who comprises the extended family of every other individual. We recognize and assist first our brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, and grandparents. Primate individuals know the members of their extended family. Other mammals do not. In a primate social system, the group is not led by a single individual, the so-called pack leader at the top of the hierarchy, but is instead led by the members of the dominant extended family. This means that the members of one family are dominant to the members of all other families, even adults back down to youngsters of the dominant family. Through the years, this dominance will shift from one family to another. The dominant extended family is that having the greatest number of healthy mothers and children. There is a mutually beneficial exchange of assistance among the members of the extended family in obtaining access to food and such. You have special feelings for your aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and siblings. You do more for them and they will do more for you. The extended family forms a large part of human nature. Recognizing the individuals of a group and knowing who is related to whom and who will come to the assistance of whom promotes bigger brains, sympathy, empathy, and self-awareness. Complex social systems promote the evolution of bigger brains. For us humans today, to know a person is to be able to predict his or her behavior in various situations. We are naturally adept at doing this. It is something we do effortlessly because our brains have evolved to perform this specific task. For a few million years, Our hominid ancestors have lived in groups of 50 or so individuals. This is the reason that our brains have the capacity to know well that number of persons. We have been recognizing faces for millions of years, but we human beings have been naming individuals for much less time. Still today, our brains are better equipped to recognize faces than to remember their names. Our brains are made for social reasoning. For example, we might figure out that Kyle is trying to get Brian to interfere in the relationship between Isabella and Jake because his third cousin's ex-roommate Carrie thinks April should get even with Jake for yelling at Jeff, who is her friend. It is not as effortless for us to do arithmetic, like dividing the number 22 by 7. We can believe that the brain of this primate is a bit different than the brain of a gazelle that has only to walk along flat ground. These are our primate cousins. Just as did our mutual ancestors several million years ago, they form a mutually beneficial social group to better accomplish any task that is larger than a single individual can do alone. The earliest tasks were watching for predators, warning others, and looking for food. Since food is found in group-sized bundles, it is best for a group to search for it together and then share it when it is found. This also means that the lives of our newly social ancestors literally depended on the community's continued existence. They developed social behaviors that kept it functioning in order to secure its continued existence and hence their own. Social individuals understand that their own behavior is not good for themselves if it damages the community, because there would then be no community. They would then be again going it alone and find themselves less likely to survive. Still today, we social primates are properly upset by the news of any disruption, from a fist fight to a crime, of the society on which we are all mutually dependent. Our notions of right and wrong stems from our innate understanding that something isn't good for me if it is not good for another member of my community. A few million years ago, social systems and social behaviors developed simultaneously. It is not the case that we lived in a social group for hundreds of generations and then added a golden rule at a later time. The golden rule is innate to a social species. The social rule and the social system are one and the same. We all agree about the proper behavior between the family, friends, and neighbors forming our society. This proper behavior is often described as the predisposition to do as the other did and to expect the other to do what you did. This agreement is synonymous with our primate social system because it is the social glue that creates that system. And with each generation, it creates anew the social group. We human beings are a bunch of genetic clones. We share identical feelings, needs, and desires. How do we differ? Only in cultural details, such as the way that we greet others, celebrate births and weddings, and make food and such. As we grow, we learn our local culture with fierce conviction. Culture consists of our recipes for how to do everything in life, and it involves some 40,000 details that fit in the brain of each person. So each one of us is very smart. Even the gatherer-hunter and cave-penner culture consists of tens of thousands of details. It takes a newborn about 25 years to learn the local culture. The 12-year-old has learned about half of those details and might become the know-it-all who speculates freely on the unknown half. Our big brains are meant to hold and to invent culture, and invent we do. For example, if you ask how a shirt should be folded the night before a wedding, someone will think of an answer that might be copied for generations. Weddings consist of many cultural details, including rings, the exact music, and walking in precisely the right way. If you ask members of one culture, why do they throw rice at a wedding, they will answer, because it has always been so, and to do otherwise risks everything. In about half the world, red is the wedding color, while white is the wedding color in another half of the world. The white wedding dress became the new Western standard only around the year 1950, but we assume that it has always been so. It surprises big city residents to learn that gatherer-hunters spend but a couple hours per day collecting food. It does not take long to collect the 10 handfuls of food that a person eats every day. Those of us human beings who are Canela live in the Brazilian forest. The village has paths connecting each home to the center. The circle is about 300 yards or meters wide. Its central region is used for dancing and singing, which occurs twice per day, and for frequent ceremonies. Here's a view from the ground. The circular layout is of the utmost importance. Following the Canela sense of symmetry, homes of certain pairs of persons are placed on opposite sides of the circle. Through the generations, names bounce around the village in ideal patterns that differ for females and males. A Canela person visiting your city would be surprised that you live in blocks rather than circles, and that the names of newborns do not bounce back and forth across the streets. Each of the world's farming cultures conducts ceremonies to accompany the planting, protecting, and harvesting of crop. The details of each ceremony are of utmost importance to the practitioners. While an outsider questions every detail, the local people take the details for granted and never ask why. The details do change slowly through the generations. The Canela planting ceremony is led by a man whose maternal home must be located on the east side of the village circle. He places a painted gourd bowl filled with maize kernels in the center of the plaza, and everyone dances around it. After those seeds are planted in his wife's field, other families begin planting their own fields. When maize has grown to a height of 1 meter or yard, another ceremony is held to induce the moon to keep parasites away from the crop. Everyone claps and sings the proper phrase, and then dances from north to south across the plaza at night under the full moon. Why do Canela do these things? They will answer, because it has always been done this way. To do otherwise risks everything. All persons are human beings no matter how they celebrate birthdays and the harvest. We humans have 1,000 cultures. All are equally happy, valid, strange, and amazing. When you find a detail that is different in another culture, its members find that you are different in that same detail. Neither group is right nor wrong. You can take a newborn child from any place on the planet and plop him or her into your own family. This newborn will learn your culture with fierce conviction and think that all other cultures are different and strange. Since there has been little change in our biology, you could even take that newborn from 50,000 years ago, and he or she would still learn your local culture and be just as likely to be a fine engineer, artist, or surgeon as any other newborn from any place today. Culture cannot be unlearned or too greatly changed later in life. For me, my view of the correct world froze in 1976 when I was 18 years old. When I see a movie that takes place in 1976, I see the cars, homes, fashions, occupations, hairstyles, utensils, and decorations and think, this is the way that the world is supposed to appear. What you might think is the right culture today is not going to last very long. As we grow, we learn the local culture with fierce conviction and ridicule anything that is slightly different. We don't yet know that culture is temporary. Today, culture changes a little every 100 miles or kilometers, and every decade. One culture in a 500-person village or in a 20 million person city cannot decide that their culture is the only right culture and demand that everyone else in the world either conform or disappear. This fierce drive to become the local culture may be all that is behind the bigotry and racism that we sometimes have. But in turn, this means that we can improve tolerance and decrease bigotry today merely by teaching our children that it is okay for the world to consist of many cultures, each doing small things in a slightly different way. Throughout grade school, children should learn sufficient details of the cultures of the peoples of the world to better understand their fellow human beings and be tolerant of cultural variations. Our daily interactions are now global. Throughout their career, today's children are likely to work in several different nations. We, the human beings of the world, will stop teaching our children to ridicule our fellow human beings just because a detail of their culture or the shape of their nose is different. We will instead find something less harmful to talk about. In fact, we will stop teaching our children to think of and refer to human beings by the color of their skin. Every human being agrees that the most beautiful thing in the universe is another person. As it is said, out of the entire universe, all we human beings really have is each other. The human in me greets the human in you. We might take the advice of the Dalai Lama and imagine being surrounded by the suffering people of the world and then try to move their suffering to yourself. Imagine all 8 billion persons on the planet thinking simultaneously about ending each other's pain. This would soon put an end to war. It is part of our nature to care about our fellow beings. Without compassion, one is not human. It takes a lifetime to learn one culture, so it is hard to fully understand a second culture. And it takes a lifetime to learn the details of one religion, so it is hard to fully understand a second religion. What is the same about each of today's world religions? The Golden Rule is the main emphasis of each of them. Onto this is added thousands of cultural details describing, for example, exactly how to stand, walk, talk, and sing. Those of us human beings who are Christians say, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Those of us human beings who are Buddhists say, "Treat everyone as if they are you," and that the group is important, not one individual. Those of us human beings who follow Islam teach one to love for your brother what you would love for yourself. And those of us human beings who are Confucianists say, before you act, apply the personal test. How would you feel yourself? You can find the answer in yourself. Humanists say that we combine efforts and live in a mutually beneficial way. If you simultaneously asked all 8 billion persons to state their guiding principle, they would answer the Golden Rule in unison because it is innate to a human being, and even to our more ancient hominid ancestors. Through 200,000 years, we have been exchanging love and kindness by the second and hugging around the campfire. When did religion expand from nature deities to moral instruction? First, Recall that for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors were gatherer hunters who lived in small bands, each separated by a few days' walk of each other. Each band required its own members to obtain spouses from one of those neighboring bands. We might say, for example, that members of Clan A must marry from Clan B. For thousands of generations, we have been marrying our neighbors, not murdering them, as some of today's warring citizens might wrongly assume. Conflict meant traveling to a distant region to make scary noises all night outside the campsite of a rival. This might result in fistfights, sometimes a kidnapping or murder, but never the slaughter of everyone in the rival camp, because there would soon be no groups left alive. Since each group had the same few possessions, there could be no spoils of war. We were in awe of the powers of nature. For example, the mysterious power that enables a bush to grow out of the ground from seemingly nothing. About 10,000 years ago, a drying climate decreased our gatherable food supply, forcing some of us to shift to full-time farming. That happened first for those of us humans living in Mesopotamia, which is ancient Iraq. When we invented the irrigation of farmlands, it turned out to be the key to abundance that enabled our population to grow 100-fold. A single room filled to the top with wheat, rice, or maize will feed thousands of persons for months. For example, one room of dimensions 30 by 30 by 4 meters or yards is 3,600 cubic meters or 3.6 million liters and feeds each of 25,000 persons about 1 liter per day for 140 days. All this from one single room. The accumulation, maintenance, and distribution of this surplus requires organization. Since the beginning, the purpose of our government has been the organization of our mutual efforts that results in our civilization. Each city is necessarily fed from crops grown in its surrounding area, which typically extends 15 kilometers or 10 miles. As neighboring cities grew outward in size, their surrounding areas began to overlap, producing arguments about bordering farmlands, water, and canals. Cities began arbitrating between the arguments of other pairs of cities in short-lived political unions. Such squabbles were recorded in the tablets for several generations before any intercity argument had brewed into a major fight. The first artistic depiction of warfare occurred around 3200 BC, but it was not a common theme until 2500 BC. While holding a bureaucratic position in an early cooperative around 2300 BC, Sargon of Agadi got the idea that an empire could be created. Sargon was the first of us humans to think of forcibly uniting the cities of a region. Having no empathy for other human beings, Sargon sought benefits for himself by directing the cruel murder of thousands of other persons, by chopping off arms, legs, and heads. Such is the character of every would-be conqueror throughout history. Before Sargon, it had not occurred to a person to conquer neighboring cities to extract payments or attempt to be emperor of the world. Such wars of mass murder had never before occurred in the history of our species, which had been unaware of the destructive power that could be harnessed from thousands of people directed by one psychopath. Such leaders have ordered the salting of farmlands or the diversion of a river to destroy a city and kill its people. Normal human beings don't think this way. Only emperors commit mass murder for personal gain. They are not the heroes of history. The leading cause of suicide among today's combat veterans is guilt from having injured or killed another human being. The emperor does not care about soldiers, victims, guilt, or the misery of others. He wants it all for himself, even if it kills thousands or millions of other persons. It took some 5,000 years, which is the first half of human civilization, for Mesopotamian farming villages to grow to population levels of a few 100,000 persons. These farming villages lived in peace for 5,000 years. No war occurred throughout this time period. War is not in human nature, and it is not a permanent part of civilization. Our first ever emperor somehow convinced his people that it will be glorious to go to another city and kill hundreds and even thousands of persons. Imagine what would have been your reaction to the news of the first ever massacre of thousands of persons. It is no coincidence that this is the time in which religion becomes moral instruction. Our most important spiritual leaders, including Moses, Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad, emerged soon after the development of large, stranger-filled cities, empires, and wars of mass murder. Our moral leaders re-emphasized our love for each other and our golden social rule. After the first emperor existed, many other kings said, "What? You can do that? I want to have an empire just like him, only bigger." War was invented to create empires. A few generations after the first empire wars, people had already come to assume that war has always occurred, but actually, war has existed only through the second half of civilization, and war has always been the idea of our leader seeking to expand his own wealth and power for his own benefit at the cost of terrible deaths for other people, by tearing away arms, legs, and heads. In each region of the world, empires grew in size and duration up through the last century. Once you've seen one pattern of sloshing kingdoms and empires, you've seen them all. The so-called winning army was simply the largest army. The purpose of government, ever since the first chiefdoms, has always been to organize our mutual efforts. Together, and with such leadership, we accomplish civilization. But the newly invented emperor demanded that we kill and be killed so that he can expand his empire. Bronowski and Maslish point out that a person will not come to your home and say, "I must kill you for your food to feed my children." We all agree that this person's lack of food is no excuse for such immoral behavior. But some kings believe that morality does not apply to them and will kill to obtain territory, raw materials, or any other object of interest. For the last 5,000 years, we have let rulers answer to no one while causing much death. We, the human beings of the world, now tell our leaders that we will conduct no more war. Our nature is to be loving and nurturing parents, not mortal combatants as a favor for kings. Love and children, not empires, stir our being. We, the human beings of the world, state that the first priority of our mutual efforts is to ensure that our babies do not die. We gauge the success of our leaders and of our civilization, first of all by our infant mortality rate, which states the number of children per 1,000 births who die before reaching their first birthday. We want to see second-by-second figures, not for stock prices, but for our infant mortality rate. Out of the world's 220 nations, the U.S. ranks number 58, falling from 12th best in 1960 to 23rd in 1990, 30th in 2005, and 56th in 2016. What could possibly matter more to us and to our political leaders than the lives of our infants. Where are our efforts instead going? Those of us humans who are humanists believe that people should not lie, cheat, steal, or kill. Proper behavior is what matters. We are all born humanists and learn different names for the things that we hold in common because they are innate to all of us. Innate things include those emotions, feelings, and behaviors that are the most impelling and hence the most rewarding. Humanists believe in the capability, responsibility, and dignity of people and in the worth of human personality. A humanist has respect for all other humans. People are what matters. This concern for people is not affected by national boundaries. For a humanist, the priorities and goals of our civilization simply involve the lives of us humans. Those of us humans who are humanists celebrate the capability, creativity, cultures, and accomplishments of the humans of the world. The views of humanists are not restricted to the details of a single culture or of a single religious or philosophical viewpoint. They celebrate them all. Humanists enjoy all aspects of the human experience, including art, science, literature, and the ideals of the world's religions. Paul Kurtz explains that people are good by nature and that we are responsible for ourselves and for the details of our own way of life. The details comprise our culture and our civilization. We humans have built our own civilization and are responsible for every aspect of it. We cannot expect a supernatural being to create or to modify our civilization for us. We must do it for ourselves. By the way, you'll find each of these elements of humanism in Carl Sagan and Anne Duran's book and movie Contact. Gerald LaRue states that sanctuaries built to honor a god are really statements honoring the humans who designed, built, and contributed to them. Humanists believe that truths matter, not dogma or ritual or membership in any particular organization. Humanists feel that we cannot cherish a truth above the evidence on which it rests. The strategy for living is to learn and adapt and improve, not to obey and conform. All persons are free to choose their own pursuits and to find meaning in their own lives. The American Humanist Association describes humanism as a rational philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. Affirming the dignity of each human being, it supports the maximization of individual liberty and opportunity consonant with social and planetary responsibility. It advocates the extension of participatory democracy and the expansion of open society, standing for human rights and social justice. Free of supernaturalism, it recognizes human beings as a part of nature and holds that values, be they religious, ethical, social, or political, have their source in human nature, experience, and culture. Humanism thus derives the goals of life from human need and interest, rather than from theological or ideological abstractions, and asserts that humanity must take responsibility for its own destiny. Since we are parenting mammals and social primates, it is in our nature to care for our children, family, friends, and society. We can tell that this is true because it is seen that we do not live as solitary animals. It is our nature to form a mutually beneficial society in which we exchange help rather than choosing to go it alone. We exchange help in any task requiring more than the efforts of one individual. Our social interactions are guided by our innate golden rule to do as the other did and to expect the other to do what you did. We react against anything less as an injustice. We have morals and are good by nature, that is, we share social behaviors. Good behaviors are those that are common to all of us, due to our common humanness, while bad behavior is any that is uncommon and one-sided. Throughout most of our past, we lived in bands of 20 persons who cooperated in life. Today we live in a band of some 7 billion persons who are cooperating in life. The form of our cooperative civilization is of our own choosing. Humanists believe that the universe is understandable even though it contains a seemingly endless variety of natural phenomena. For example, a human being. The workings of the universe can be understood through the scientific method of performing repeatable experiments. This enables us to understand how atoms and molecules naturally form into the self-directing, self-duplicating, and self-building combinations that are life. We humans are conscious little molecule machines that have rational capabilities and a tremendous future. We use our minds and hearts to create many things, including our cultures and civilization. It is quite a rare privilege to be this combination of atoms and molecules, as opposed to being a rock, for example. We must take advantage of this opportunity and do something meaningful with our existence. Every person on the planet agrees that it's great to be alive, to share life, and to enjoy the little things. A humanist friend of mine said that one day when he was at a Christian church, the preacher expressed her love of God and the joy it brings her by saying, "Isn't it great to have the Lord in you?" In the same way, humanists love humans and say, "Isn't it great to be human?" We feel great joy in being human and for having the opportunity to be alive and to share in our civilization. For the Christian, God is of utmost importance. For the humanist, people are of utmost importance. Rather than asking, "What will God grant?" humanists say, "Let's accomplish this with our mutual efforts." A humanist says that whenever any pair of humans meet, they should jump up and down and say, "Isn't it great to be human?" In fact, all the peoples of the world should share in our mutual celebration for our opportunity for life, for cooperation in building our civilization through 500 generations, and for finally beginning to understand ourselves. We're a lucky bunch of atoms. The motivation behind most every thought or action of every human being involves our love for our children, our spouse, our friends, and extended family, along with our concern for our community and for the just exchanges that create our community. The utmost concerns of parenting and social humans are love and children, family and friends, community and justice. We know that these concerns are common to each of us because we share a common humanness. These few things comprise human existence, explain the world of us humans and our myriad of activities, and are the priorities of our mutual civilization. It is no accident that these are the topics of most every conversation and of most every artwork. Our arts express and communicate these cares and emotions. Our religions emphasize these more important aspects of ourselves and society, and our governments legally define and defend them. This means that religion, government, and science all agree about the most important aspects of a human and of human society. It could not occur that these three activities of humans would each come to a different conclusion, just as it could not possibly occur that our cultural, religion, government, or civilization are unrelated to our nature. The nature of a human and the necessarily matched goals of human civilization are summed up as our concern for our children, families, friends, and society and its justice.
As it is said, the best hope for humanity is a belief in humanity, along with trust, mutual respect, a concern for one another's well-being, and a belief in the fundamental good of each person. The belief in humanity and the knowledge that we are all in this together, pooling efforts for our mutual benefit, are warm spiritual things that comfort our minds and heart, give us a sense of purpose, and inspire us to greater accomplishments. The next step in the social system of human beings is going to be the development of a global view of humanity and a global cooperation on global tasks. The innate urge that propels you to cooperate and to exchange help with other people today is the same feeling, mental state, and drive that was experienced by our distant social primate ancestors beginning several million years ago. We first cooperated in finding food and watching for predators. This urge to cooperate and to exchange assistance in a mutually beneficial manner creates a social species. Without this urge, a species does not become social. Social species and the golden social rule necessarily occur as a pair. What does it mean to be a social primate? We live together in a group and exchange assistance for our mutual benefit on any task requiring more than the effort of a single individual. We are experts at determining which tasks qualify. The term social primate may not mean a whole lot to you, but your emotions and feelings do. Think of a recent helping situation that you were involved in and recall the inner feeling that propelled you to action. That feeling has been occurring within your ancestors through the last several million years. As Johnson explained, that feeling is like a little emotional packet that has traveled through time, connecting you to the first humans and even to your more remote social primate ancestors. Today's individual acts of mutual assistance are due to the same innate drive to cooperate that has existed since we first became social primates. For example, today, some of us become choked up whenever we see the exchange of assistance occurring as traffic makes way for an ambulance. Our reputation in the community is both the carrot and the stick for our behavior. It is terrible to experience ostracism. We strive to be a valued and contributing member of our community, and a happy, rewarding feeling floods within ourselves when we receive the approval of family, friends, and society. What makes us happy? We obtain happiness only from other people, not from things. We are happiest when our family and group members are happiest. Each of us simply wants to laugh and joke with our family and friends, pursue life, and raise children. Most of us feel that success in life is measured in terms of happy and healthy children, families, and communities. We are a social species.
In the year 1668, Comenius said that we, the whole human race, are the only posterity, the only blood. Therefore, in the same right as a limb assists all other limbs of a body, also we have to assist each other.
Throughout the history of civilization, our continued mutually beneficial exchange of help today merely occurs in a less directly visible manner, as each of us contributes our lifetime's effort to the operation of human civilization. We do this by working our daily job and constituting one generation of change. Our civilization is the sum of all of our efforts. Our lives seem more independent of the other members of our community, but our mix of specialized occupations actually makes us more interdependent today than we have ever been in the past. Our interdependence is visible as the traffic, comprised of everyone going about the daily jobs that combine into our civilization. For us to have food, clothes, tools, and decorations requires the combined efforts of all of us, including our farmers, artists, processors, and retailers. We are all in this together. It is not each person for themselves. While aging from 10 to 100, we realize that there is something greater than ourselves and that we're a member of a whole. That whole is the mutually beneficial pooling of efforts that comprise human society and civilization. The next time you sit in your car, cursing the stoplights and traffic and looking at hundreds of other atom and DNA-filled persons doing the same thing, you might amuse yourself by considering those hundreds of occupations being performed that day by those visible persons. Each of these persons has nearly identical DNA, but differing personalities and life histories. Each person you see has had an entire life before passing you at that moment in time, and each of them looks forward to a pleasant future full of love and laughter. During the few minutes that elapsed before you encountered each of those persons, each of them had thoughts about spouse, family, and society, just as you did. Since each person is so similar, you can imagine that the traffic consists of nothing but copies of yourself. Chat and interact with all persons as if they are yourself, because they nearly are yourself.
We human beings have demonstrated tremendous talent and capabilities by making rapid progress, both in our understanding of nature and in building our civilization of arts, government, religion, business, science, and technology in just 10,000 years, which is 500 generations, and in doing it with nothing but our animal minds. Our global human civilization is the sum of all the techniques, procedures, and understandings that all of us have contributed. Human progress occurs as techniques and understandings bounce from one person to another, each taking what was known and adding something to it. Now it is our generation's turn to add to the mutual development and make the world a better place for all 7 billion of us. Beginning about 10,000 years ago, we learned to farm, to build villages, and to build social structures larger than our innate band of a few extended families. At any time or in any place around the planet, whenever hundreds of us humans got together to form a tribe or chiefdom, we would build earth and mound structures like this one in Newgrange, Ireland, that is 5,000 years old. We would build irrigation systems like this canal, first dug in Timbuktu in Mali some 500 years ago, and we would build stone monuments such as this one in Spain. Louisiana's Poverty Point Mound was built 4,000 years ago in the shape of an eagle, and from its summit gives an eagle's eye view of the treetops. One of the first things every group of people will do is to try to find how big a rock they can carve or move, or how large a mound of earth they can create. Whenever tens of thousands of us get together, we build temples, palaces, cities, and city-states. The city of Cahokia near today's St. Louis had a population of 20,000 persons about 1,000 years ago, which was several centuries before the voyages of Columbus. The earth and rock structures we build express our inner drives and our inner view of the world. This is Great Zimbabwe. During construction, each person within the group typically spends 1 week per month working on these structures, such as this one at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, or the temple at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. After finishing these structures, we all stand back and admire our mutual accomplishment. Here is the Taj Mahal and the pyramids of Cheops. What can billions of us build today? Make a list. Discuss your list with others. Our mutual efforts can build anything that any of us can imagine, and we can make our civilization into any form we want. What are we now building? One humanist has asked if our ancestors from 5 or even 50,000 years ago would be proud of us. Will we be proud of the accomplishments of future generations? Notice that our monuments are also works of art, from the Art Deco of the Hoover Dam to the Opera House in Sydney. In fact, most every tool we make, from a bowl to an automobile, is also a work of art. We leave few things undecorated. Alice Walker says that our body needs food to live, but our minds and soul need beauty to survive. Our artists help to fill our lives with beauty and inspiration and help us to experience and communicate our emotions and nature. The physicist Richard Feynman explained that scientists use their imagination to guess the true reality of nature, while artists instead use their imagination to invent a reality that does not otherwise exist. The scientific method is our way of building facts and understandings from repeatable measurements. Through the last few centuries, 1 million scientists spent their lifetime studying millions of natural phenomena. At first, these numerous phenomena seemed to be unrelated, but through our combined efforts we have figured out that each of these is simply a different aspect of a mere handful of fundamental phenomena. That is, a few scientific principles explain millions of phenomena and billions of repeatable measurements. In the year 1687, Isaac Newton figured out a single equation that numerically describes all motion. The equation states when a force F is placed on a mass m, then the mass will speed up or accelerate. Mass resists the acceleration. Any motion that you have ever seen is described by Newton's single equation. It describes the motion of cars and trains, the motion of the air over a wing that lifts an airplane into the air, and it describes the trajectories of spaceflight and the orbits of planets around the sun. In the year 1687, nobody could believe that a mere human being could find an equation that even the heavens obeyed. Every mechanical device that will ever be made is created by using Isaac Newton's motion equation. Heat phenomena and heat engines are also described by Newton's equation, because heat is due to the motion of the atoms comprising a material. In the year 1864, James Maxwell figured out a set of equations that describe all electromagnetic phenomena. Every aspect of light, from rainbows to radar, and every electrical device that will ever be made. In 1864, nobody could imagine the endless uses of these equations that today are used to create computers, electric letter openers, X-ray and MRI devices, cell phones, cameras, and microwave ovens. These things benefit everyone. Newton's equation relates motion to its causal force. Physicists have found that only 5 forces exist in nature. The 5 forces are the gravitational force between two masses, 2 nuclear forces that bind matter into nuclei, and the magnetic and electric forces. The electric force is important to us because we are made of atoms held together by this force. The electrical force binds atoms and molecules, including the molecules of life. It is also the force behind many material interactions that you see every day, including saran wrap, rubber bands, and our sense of touch. When these 5 forces are placed into Newton's equation, or rather a modern relativistic quantum mechanical form of it, such as the Dirac equation, Much of the physical universe is explained, including millions of natural phenomena and billions of repeatable measurements. It is incredible that the universe can be mathematically modeled with a handful of simple equations, and it is pretty impressive that we human beings have figured this out. These equations are fundamental truths of nature that will be useful for every person on the planet for all generations to come. Through recent decades, physicists have been trying to see if these 5 forces are just different aspects of a single force. Major steps in our understanding of nature are built from many smaller understandings. Scientists work for the thrill of being the first person to understand a new aspect of nature, and to be the first person to think of something that has never before been thought. Just as nobody could imagine the endless uses of Newton's and Maxwell's equations when they were first worked out in previous centuries, nobody today can imagine the understandings and the machines that will result from the studies in today's physics lab, or the understandings and machines and medicines that will result from the studies being done in today's biology labs. It is beginning to look as if many future machines will be biologically based. Scientists and engineers build understanding, techniques, machines, and medicines that change our daily way of life and make life better for all of us. This is in contrast to people such as Napoleon, who manage only to temporarily rearrange political borders and tax centers. The discoverers of electromagnetism, quantum mechanics, antibiotics, and genes, and the inventors of engines, computers, and phones and such have improved our lives. For example, cooking was the same before and after Napoleon, but was changed first by the inventor of the iron stove, and then by the inventor of the microwave oven. Through the next few decades, neuroscience, nanoscience, and genetic engineering and such will continue their golden age of fundamental discoveries. On a daily basis, hundreds of thousands of scientists are making incredible discoveries about nature. Which future tool will be next to significantly alter our lives? Will it be genetic engineering, fusion power, quark-based machinery, the colonization of other planets, or something as unimaginable as were electronic computers some 150 years ago when Maxwell finalized the equations describing electricity? You can have a lifelong career in science that is full of adventure and discovery and help humanity to accomplish these things. By the way, fusion power might just bring megawatts into our homes. With such power, one could place some hydrogen and carbon and such into a machine, apply a few megawatts, and produce a tomato or some other such edible organic food. This machine would be able to produce any other machine, and it could even change one nuclei into another, turning lead into gold. With such power, will anyone work in a factory? Would we care about gold anymore? How will life be different? Just 100 years ago, nobody could imagine electric stoves and microwave ovens that would bring kilowatts into our homes. A single person working alone throughout a lifetime, without ever seeing or speaking to another human being, could advance human knowledge by only a tiny, tiny step. Even if that lone person had 100 lifetimes, very little advancement would be made. But if we get 100 persons together, much more progress is made. What can billions of us accomplish together? Picture a group of just 100 persons who can easily stand in a single room, and let them represent the sequence of your 100 most recent grandmothers, who together reach back about 2,000 years, back to ancient Rome and Greece, and about to the times of Buddha, Christ, Confucius, and Muhammad. In only 100 generations, we have progressed from that time to today. Our scientific progress and the evolution of our arts and knowledge can be represented by a series of portraits of individuals relaying techniques through those generations. Development occurs as insight and knowledge bounces from one individual to another, with each person adding a little before passing it on. Human capability is demonstrated by the rapid progress in understanding nature, in developing our civilization, by the buildings and institutions we construct, by the quality of daily work done by each of us, and by the incredible talents of our artists. Talent inspires us. If it were up to me, I'd fill our parks and public spaces with artists and art, and fill the daily news with examples of talent. Theatrical plays and musical presentations are two examples of what results from the mutual efforts of a small number of us. By choosing to be an artist, you can have a lifetime experiencing and communicating human emotions, senses, and experience. We human beings celebrate life with music and dance, with learning and discovery, by making and enjoying art, by doing science, by building things and understandings, and by directly experiencing all human senses and emotions. We laugh and cry and are happy and sad. Our set of behaviors, emotions, and morals are naturally matched to our animal, parenting, and social lives. Being human means that one is caring, nurturing, and loving towards others, and it means sharing mutual commitments with spouse, children, extended family, friends, and community, or our social species would not still be here. Think carefully and often about what makes you happy, about our shared humanness, and what are the character and goals of our mutual civilization. Choose meaningful goals and priorities for your life's effort, and frequently ponder the meaning of life. Many persons have decided that the meaning of life includes seeking happiness and raising children, but we all get to decide for ourselves. Be sure to do something meaningful with your life. Your contributions to the progress of humanity will continue to benefit future generations. Contribute all that you can, because the more you contribute, the happier you will be. We are all in this together. The future of humanity is in our own hands. If you ask persons from each of 10,000 different places in the world, they would all agree that we live for our children, and that the most meaningful thing in life is to have happy and healthy children, families, and communities. We all agree that each newborn child is equally important to our society and is equally deserving and capable of a full life, not to mention a happy and healthy life. And we want every child to have the opportunity to contribute all of his or her talents to our mutual civilization. You can walk up to any person on the planet and ask, "How is the family and community?" and you will get an answer, because that is about all anyone thinks about. As people go through the day, we might ask them to hold up their arm while thinking of their children, spouse, extended family, or the community. And throughout most of the day, all 7 billion of us would be walking around with our arm held up. That is how similar we are to each other. Much of human passion and effort involves love, parenthood, family, community, and justice, and guarding against injustice. Being human also means intellectualizing and combining effort. Knowing something about the nature of humans and the flow of our civilization helps us to better choose our combined future. We are social primates who care first for our extended family and then for the other members of our society. And we care for our society because our mutual lives depends on its continued existence. It is not every person for themselves. That has been the case since the time of the first society. We are members of a culture, individuals of unique talents and tastes, and individuals who contribute to our civilization's operation, achievements, and goals. For a human, life is not lived alone. Our goals and priorities in life involve more than ourselves. We are not creatures who live alone and independent on mountaintops. You can choose to be a lone hermit, but we do not have to consciously decide to live in a community. That is what we do naturally. We innately form societies because they are mutually beneficial to all of us. If they were not, then we would stop pulling efforts and stop being members. The mutually beneficial exchange of help, described as our golden rule, is the glue that creates our society, and our society is recreated by this glue with each new generation, as it has done for millions of years. While aging from 10 to 100, we realize that there is something greater than ourselves, and that we are a member of a whole. That nature made us human, and from this beginning, we continue to form the culture and civilization of our own choosing, limited only by our imagination and human nature. Choosing goals for our lives and for our mutual civilization requires asking what we are, what is our nature, what is important to a human, what are our own goals in life, what life is about, and what is the nature of our cooperation in life. We agree that happy and healthy children, families, and communities are most important, not war and power. We want to arrange our civilization such that we continually increase the well-being and the quality of life, even the happiness, for the largest possible portion of us. It will then be mutually beneficial for all of us. Why would any of us contribute our lifetime's effort to anything less? We all agree that anything less is an injustice, and we are naturally adept at recognizing unjust actions. Notice that each time you get angry, it is in response to what you believe has been an unfair treatment by another person. We get angry for no other reason. How are we doing today on a global scale for our worldwide population of about 7 billion persons? The answer is that 1 in 4 of us human beings do not have access to clean water and sanitation and go hungry. 1 in 6 of us live in slums and shanties. Our job is to do better for more of us. Our slums contain thousands and thousands of Rembrandts and Einsteins who must spend their days simply searching for each day's food. Our mutual society suffers when we create constraints that keep some of our members from contributing all of their talents. By combining our efforts, today's 7 billion of us can build anything we can imagine. In fact, we can do much more than the technologically and financially simple task of ensuring our basic needs for food, sanitation, and clean water, homes, health, and education. These are the basic priorities for the mutual efforts that are our human civilization, but beyond that, we can ensure that all of us have the full and unconstrained opportunity to pursue the limits of our individual and combined scientific, artistic, technological, and other intellectual talents, interests, passions, and goals. Together, we will strive to build a just civilization that frees our lives from the simple animal existence of collecting daily food and water, so that we then free our minds and spirits. We can then spend our lifetimes improving ourselves and our civilization. How well do you rate our efforts through the last 10,000 years in building human civilization to match our innate nature to care for our children, spouse, extended families, friends, and society, to pursue our individual and combined talents and interests, and live free from injustice? How well do you compare the capacity of our past ages with that of today's? in enabling such things as our health, well-being, education, use of talent, our happiness, community ties, social and economic opportunity and equality, and hope for the future.
What is human civilization? It is our cultural solution to the problem of coordinating populations greater than the 50-person bands of our biological heritage. It is our mutual collection of tools and procedures meant to make life better for all of us. And it is the sum of the efforts of each of us combined for our mutual benefit. We are all in this together. All of the humans of the earth have been combining knowledge since the time of the first humans. Human civilization began with the food surpluses and population expansion that accompanied our climate-forced conversion from gathering and hunting to full-time farming. This first occurred some 10,000 years ago for those of us human beings who were Mesopotamians in ancient Iraq. Human civilization consists of our trial-and-error solutions to a succession of problems. Problems are typically solved after some stumbling in the dark, sometimes for decades. But we human beings have solved every problem that has developed. The proof is given by the fact that we are still here.
In today's push-button big city, we have fewer reasons to exchange assistance with our neighbors because very few chores require the efforts of more than one person or more than a few moments of time. Moving day is one of our largest chores. During the switch from farming to factory work through the 1800s, there was much contemporary discussion about the readily apparent lessening in community ties since factory workers were finding fewer reasons to exchange help with their neighbors than had their farming parents. Because we are a social species, some of us who live in the big city today naturally get an ill feeling in our stomach about our seemingly insufficiently connected society. Neighbors still help each other the instant a need arises, but it often requires a natural disaster to produce a visible need to which we will then innately respond. And we are then relieved to see the exchange of help because it makes us feel that we are members of a society after all. The urge we feel to exchange help and to pool resources today is the same feeling and mental state experienced by our first social primate ancestors. Whether exchanging help in the search for food and warning of predators, or in the 19th century chore of harvesting the hay crop. Today's individual acts of mutual assistance are due to the same innate drive to cooperate that has existed since we first became social primates. We are pooling efforts every day. Each of us contributes our lifetime's effort in keeping our civilization going and in pushing its progress. How do you gauge success in life?
What is the meaning of life?
What are the most important things in life for you? What makes you happy? What should be the priorities for the mutual efforts that are our regional and global society? Which criteria do we use to measure the success of our attempts to govern ourselves?
Very frequently, tell your political leaders about your conclusions.
We might take the advice of the Dalai Lama and, at the end of each day, review our thoughts and actions. Repeat often those that made us happy and avoid those that did not. Let's go contribute our effort to make our mutual world a better place for all of us. Vote against war and help to ensure that all of us get the opportunity to contribute all that we can so that our whole will be all that it can be. Understanding our own nature along with something about the flow of civilization helps us form a more clear idea of our place in the universe and helps us to together choose where next to take our civilization by choosing goals that best match our own nature. Everything you see, from roads to temples, and every institution and policy on the planet were imagined and built by our own efforts. and we see that we are in fact controlling the operation of our civilization and its destiny. Together, we will build our future.